The part of you that will destroy your life is not out there. It's not your enemies, your critics, or even the disasters you can see coming. It's something far closer. It's inside you, and it's wearing your face. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the hidden side of your psyche where you bury the traits, instincts, and desires you don't want the world, or even yourself, to see. We think of it as a place for our shame, our rage, our jealousy. But here's the truth no one likes to say out loud. The shadow doesn't stay locked away just because you pretend it's not there. It moves, it learns, and if you ignore it long enough, it hunts. That's what we're talking about in this video, not just what the shadow is, but how it becomes a predator inside you. You're going to learn how it was built in the first place, how it stalks you through projection, temptation, and sabotage, and most importantly, how to stop it before it destroys you. We'll trace the shadow's path from childhood conditioning to adult destruction. We'll reveal the hunting patterns it uses to push you toward the same mistakes over and over again. We'll dissect it like a forensic psychologist analyzing a criminal mind. And then we'll go further into the most dangerous territory, facing it directly, so you can integrate it and claim its power as your own. Along the way, you'll hear from Jung's original writings, modern psychology, and cautionary tales from history and pop culture. You'll see why nations fall when they ignore their collective shadows, and why individuals implode when they refuse to face their personal one. Because here's the most dangerous thing about your shadow. It never comes at you screaming. It arrives as the friend you trust but secretly envy. The relationship you know is toxic but can't walk away from. The job you throw away when it finally starts to go well. It appears as chaos when your life feels too stable. It shows up as opportunity right when you swore you'd change. If that sounds uncomfortably familiar, you're in the right place. By the time this video ends, you'll know how to sense the shadow moving before it strikes, how to hear its voice beneath the mask, and how to turn toward it instead of running. If you're ready to meet the part of you that's been quietly writing your story, let's begin. Every villain needs a disguise, and your most dangerous one wears yours perfectly. The shadow doesn't announce itself with flashing warnings or dramatic breakdowns, at least, not at first. It operates like a slow poison, dripping into your choices until the damage feels like bad luck, bad timing, or just the way life is. You don't even realize it's you pulling the trigger. Jung saw it everywhere, in his patients, in leaders, in entire cultures. The shadow is the part of you that holds everything you've disowned, the anger you weren't allowed to express, the desires you were told were shameful, the selfishness you learned to hide. But here's the twist. It's not gone, it's alive, and it's patient. Think about the last time you overreacted to someone, snapped at a harmless comment, or felt instant hatred for a stranger. That's projection. You weren't seeing them. You were seeing a part of yourself you refuse to admit exists. Your shadow slipped a mask over their face and whispered, "There, that's the enemy." Or maybe your shadow works in sabotage. Ever notice how you ruin things just as they're getting good? The relationship that's finally stable, but you pick a fight. The project that's gaining momentum, but you forget a deadline. You tell yourself it's fear of success, imposter syndrome, bad luck. But deep down, it's the parts of you that don't believe you deserve it, quietly pulling the plug. And then there are the compulsions, the moments you swear, "I don't know what came over me," but you do know, you just don't want to. Jung warned that what you refuse to make conscious will control you from the shadows. We think we're in charge, but the truth? Most of us are walking around like puppets with invisible strings. Strings we tied ourselves. The shadow doesn't need force. It uses familiarity. It knows your blind spots better than you do because it's been watching you since the day you learned to hide who you were. The world tells you to focus on the positive, look toward the light. But if Jung was right, and he usually was, this obsession with light is exactly what keeps you blind to the darkness running the show. And blindness is the shadow's greatest weapon. Ignore it long enough, and it stops being a silent passenger. It takes the wheel, and when it does, you won't see the crash coming. If you ignore your shadow long enough, it doesn't just sit there, waiting for you to have a breakdown. It evolves. Carl Jung never described the shadow as evil in the fairy tale sense. It's morally neutral, a storage vault for everything about you that's been pushed out of sight. Some of what's in there is destructive. Rage, envy, cruelty. Some of it is gold you've abandoned. Confidence, creativity, assertiveness. But here's the part most people don't realize. An unacknowledged shadow becomes adaptive. It learns to move in your blind spots, and, like a skilled predator, it hunts. Think about this. Every self-sabotaging move you've ever made, every "I can't believe I did that again" moment, every cycle you can't break, it's not random, it's not bad luck, it's choreography. The shadow is directing it, using your own desires, fears, and memories as bait. Here's how it hunts you. It studies your weak points like a sniper in the dark, memorizing the exact people, situations, and words that make you flinch. It doesn't waste energy striking at random. It waits for those precise moments when your guard is down, when you're tired, distracted, or desperate. It feeds on repetition, guiding you back into the same kinds of relationships, the same dead-end jobs, the same self-destructive cycles, over and over, until the pattern feels like destiny. And then it camouflages itself in the most insidious way. It speaks in your own voice, not as a threat, but as reason. You don't need to try that hard. You deserve to quit. They'll hurt you if you trust them. You don't question it because it sounds like you, and that's how it wins, by convincing you that you're the one making the choice. The reason this hits so hard is because the shadow's intelligence is entirely built from you. It's not guessing your moves, it wrote them. Jung wrote, "The shadow personifies everything that the subject refuses to acknowledge about himself." But over time, that personification can start to feel like a separate presence living in you. It's not just a reflection, it's an actor playing the lead role in your life when you're distracted. You see this on a global scale when nations ignore their collective shadows. History is filled with societies that refused to confront their buried prejudices, fears, and unresolved pain, only to watch those forces return as extremism, violence, or collapse. What happens to a nation happens to an individual. If you deny it long enough, it doesn't just come back, it comes back stronger. The personal cost is enormous. People lose decades repeating the same relationships, chasing the same unattainable approval, sabotaging the very stability they claim to want. You might say you want love, but choose partners who replicate the wounds of your childhood. You say you want success, but your shadow convinces you to wait until you're ready, knowing you never will be. You say you want peace, but you stir drama the moment things feel calm, because calm feels foreign. This is where the shadow stops being just an abstract concept and becomes something with teeth. Something that doesn't just react, it stalks. And if you don't notice it moving, it will take you down without a fight. Most people never spot the predator until it's too late. They call it bad luck, toxic people, or just how I am. They never realize it's them. It's always been them, until the cost is too high to reverse. I've seen what happens when the shadow goes unchecked. First in other people, and then, uncomfortably, in myself. It doesn't stop moving just because you refuse to look at it. In fact, the longer you ignore it, the more it learns how to work around your awareness. And you can't counter what you won't acknowledge. What I'm doing here is giving you a way to see it clearly, to name it, so it loses its advantage. If you're serious about understanding the forces that shape you, not the ones you post about, but the ones that decide how you live, then stick around. This isn't about comfort, it's about giving you the tools to dismantle the patterns before they dismantle you. And believe me, the shadow isn't going to lose interest just because you're not paying attention. If you've seen the predator, the next step is to understand its anatomy, because what you can map, you can track, and what you can track, you can dismantle. Jung's great insight was that the shadow is not chaos, it is architecture, carefully assembled, layered, reinforced over years of conditioning. It is both your prison and your blueprint, the hidden scaffolding around which much of your life has been built without your conscious consent. To fear it is to remain in its design. To understand it is to redraw the plans. Most people meet their shadow the way you meet a storm. You feel it, you react, and you hope it passes. But storms have weather patterns. The shadow has them too. The problem is, we rarely stop to study them. Without that study, you'll mistake its moves for your own personality. You'll say, "That's just how I am," when in truth, it's how you've been programmed to be. Consider the morning argument with your partner that spirals far beyond the original spark. You think you're angry because they forgot to do the dishes, but the intensity, the sharp edge belongs to something much older, a part of you that learned long ago that being overlooked means being unloved. That part doesn't distinguish between a sink full of plates and the first time you felt invisible. That's the shadow's architecture at work. It routes present events through ancient wiring, producing disproportionate force. Or imagine you're at work and you get the chance to lead a high-stakes project. You've wanted this for years, but suddenly you're too busy, not ready, or not the right fit. These are the conscious excuses, but underneath them is the shadow's structural code, the lessons from childhood that told you success makes you a target, or that stepping forward invites criticism. The architecture ensures you stay inside the blueprint, even if that blueprint keeps you small. Even trivial moments carry its signature. Road rage is rarely about the car in front of you. It's about years of swallowed resentment finally given an outlet that feels safe because it's anonymous. Ghosting someone after a great date might not be protecting your freedom, but avoiding intimacy, because the architecture equates closeness with danger. Jung called the shadow the thing a person has no wish to be. It contains what you condemn in yourself: rage, envy, greed, but also the strengths you were told were unsafe to express: confidence, ambition, independence. Every suppressed quality, whether negative or positive, is pushed into the unconscious. The unconscious is not dead space, it is dynamic. These disowned traits remain active, influencing perception, emotion, and behavior from below the surface. This is why Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The shadow's architecture is laid early, often before we have the words to describe it. Childhood becomes the construction site. A child scolded for expressing anger learns to push that emotion deep underground, burying it so thoroughly that even as an adult they might insist, "I'm just not an angry person." A child mocked for tenderness learns to put on armor, disguising care as detachment. A child punished for wanting too much learns the safety of wanting less. Each of these moments becomes a design choice in the unconscious, one you didn't know you were making. Layer by layer, a second self takes shape. It becomes a city you live inside, with walls you can't see but can always feel. These walls don't just keep the world out, they keep parts of you locked in. This process isn't confined to individuals. Jung observed that the same dynamics exist in societies, a phenomenon he called the collective shadow. Groups, like people, repress the traits they find unacceptable in themselves and project them outward. Prejudice, scapegoating, social division, and even mass violence often have their roots in this unacknowledged collective architecture. On both personal and societal levels, what is denied does not disappear, it waits. An unintegrated shadow is not content to remain silent. It seeks expression, and it finds ways to move through you without your consent. Sometimes it emerges through projection, where you encounter in others the very qualities you refuse to see in yourself. You don't just notice these traits, you despise them, certain they are someone else's flaws. In reality, you're staring into a mirror you don't recognize. Other times it surfaces through triggers, those moments when something small unleashes a storm of emotion. A glance, a word, a tone of voice can set off a reaction that feels disproportionate to the situation because it's not really about the situation at all. It's about the old wiring buried in your shadow being jolted to life. And then there is sabotage. This is the shadow's most strategic move, rerouting you away from growth or stability and back toward the patterns it knows. You may call it procrastination, self-doubt, or just bad timing, but these moments are rarely accidents. They are the architecture doing exactly what it was built to do: protect the self-pitism you were trained to keep, even if that image keeps you small. When you finally understand this structure, you stop mistaking the design for destiny. You begin to recognize the exits, the pressure points, the patterns. You see projection in real time and choose to own it. You catch a trigger mid-surge and ask what it's protecting. You watch sabotage forming and take the step it's trying to block. Integration is not demolition. As Jung wrote, One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim what was yours all along. Anger transmuted into assertiveness, ambition into purpose, creativity into innovation. The shadow is not just your darkness, it is your unclaimed potential, bound in the same architecture that's been keeping you small. Understanding that architecture is the only way to dismantle it without destroying yourself in the process. At some point, running stops working. The longer you avoid the shadow, the more territory it takes. But here's the paradox. The only way to end the hunt is to turn toward the thing that's been hunting you. Jung called this process integration, and he saw it as essential for what he named individuation, the journey toward becoming a whole, authentic self. Integration doesn't mean becoming pure light or fixing yourself into perfection. It means pulling the disowned parts out of the dark so they can serve you instead of sabotage you. But confronting the shadow is not an act of brute force. You don't conquer it with positive thinking or by killing your darker impulses. You approach it with the precision of someone dismantling a bomb, patiently, with awareness, because every part of it is wired into you. The first step is simple in concept but uncomfortable in practice. Watch yourself without judgment. Notice your projections. Pay attention to the people who provoke an instant, visceral reaction in you, whether it's admiration, hatred, or envy. Ask yourself, what do they carry that I've buried in myself? Notice your triggers, the times you overreact, the times you feel possessed by a mood or emotion. These are the shadow pressing against the walls of your conscious mind. Keep a written record. The goal isn't to stop the reaction instantly, it's to catch it in the act, so it can't operate invisibly. Jung developed a method called active imagination, a way to engage directly with unconscious material. This isn't about fantasy roleplay, it's about sitting with the image or feeling of your shadow and letting it speak. In practice, this could mean visualizing the shadow as a figure and asking it questions. Why are you here? What do you want? What do you need from me? At first, you may think you're making it up, but often the responses surprise you. This is your unconscious using symbols and narratives to communicate what logic alone has ignored. The shadow doesn't only hold the traits you fear, it also holds the strengths you've exiled. Anger, when integrated, becomes healthy assertiveness. Envy, when owned, can point toward what you truly desire. Even selfishness, in balance, can become self-respect. Integration means taking these raw, unpolished elements and refining them. You're not becoming someone else, you're reclaiming the person you've always been, without the internal censorship. You don't integrate the shadow in one grand confrontation. You do it by slowly bringing pieces of it into daylight. If you've avoided conflict your whole life, start by expressing one honest opinion you'd usually swallow. If you've feared being seen, allow yourself to take credit for one achievement without downplaying it. These are micro-adjustments, but over time, they rewire the architecture from the inside. Most people will never do this work. They'll keep running until the shadow catches up, and then they'll wonder why life feels like a loop they can't escape. The patterns will keep repeating, not because the world is against them, but because they're still living inside the blueprint the shadow built decades ago. Jung warned that what you resist persists. The shadow doesn't vanish when ignored. It becomes the author of your story. Turning toward it is not about taming a monster. It's about reclaiming the pen. The hunt ends the moment you stop being prey. That happens not by overpowering the shadow, but by inviting it to sit at your table. At first, it will come snarling, dripping with all the years of neglect and fear. But over time, as you meet it without running, it will stop being the thing that stalks you in the dark and become the thing that walks beside you. Your shadow is the sum of everything you've been told to hide. It's the echo of your most painful lessons and the vault of your greatest untapped strengths. Ignore it, and it will keep writing your story for you. Face it, and you become the author. But if you've stayed with me this far, it means you're not interested in surface-level fixes. You want to know what's really moving you, and that's exactly what I make these videos for. So if you're ready to keep building the awareness and the tools to face the forces shaping you from the inside, subscribe now. That way, the next time your shadow moves, you'll see it before it strikes. Because the most dangerous predator in your life isn't out there, it's the part of you you've never met.